Imagine a world with no nations, no borders, no laws, no cities, just ice. Endless, brutal, bone-crushing ice. Now imagine one species, fragile, small, no claws, no fangs, deciding to walk into that frozen nightmare and survive. Not just survive, dominate. This is the story of Europe, and it doesn't start with kings or empires or wars. It starts with a fire in a cave 35,000 years ago. The continent you think you know, the birthplace of democracy, science, art, literature, and modern civilization, was built on something far more ancient, far more strange, and far more violent than any history class ever told you.
Stick with us, because by the time this series is done, you will never look at the modern world the same way again. Welcome to Drawn and Buried, and this is the story of Europe.
Here's a fact that almost nobody talks about. Europe is not really a continent. Technically, geographically, it's a peninsula, a massive arm of land jutting out from the western edge of Asia, surrounded on three sides by water: the Atlantic to the west, the Mediterranean to the south, the Arctic Ocean to the north. It's smaller than the United States, much smaller than Asia or Africa. And yet, this small, cold, rainy, rocky peninsula went on to shape the entire planet. How? Why here? Why not somewhere bigger, somewhere warmer? The answer starts 135 million years ago, when there was no Europe at all. In the beginning, all the land on Earth was one massive supercontinent. Then the world cracked open. Land masses broke apart, drifted, collided, and reformed, creating mountains, rivers, coastlines, and seas. Over millions of years, something began to take shape in the northwest corner of the ancient world. A jagged, complex landmass, full of rivers that connected inland to the sea, full of coastlines that made ocean travel possible, full of mountain ranges that created natural boundaries, forcing different peoples into different valleys, growing different crops, speaking different languages, developing different ideas. That complexity, that diversity forced by geography, would turn out to be Europe's greatest weapon. Because while a continent of flat, open plains tends to produce one dominant culture, a continent full of mountains, islands, and rivers produces dozens. And when dozens of cultures compete, argue, trade, and fight with each other for thousands of years, something extraordinary happens. Innovation explodes. But before any of that, before the Greeks, before Rome, before Christianity, or Columbus, or democracy, there were just the first arrivals, wandering out of Africa into the ice. Here's what nobody tells you about the first Europeans. They weren't European at all. They came from Africa. Around 60,000 years ago, early Homo sapiens, our direct ancestors, began migrating out of Africa in small groups, following coastlines and river valleys, searching for food in warmer land. Some went east, into Asia, and eventually the Americas. Some went north, into the freezing, hostile world that would one day become Europe. The continent they entered looked nothing like what we see today. Massive glaciers covered huge portions of the land. The English Channel didn't exist. Britain was connected to France by dry land. Enormous animals roamed the tundra: woolly mammoths, cave lions, woolly rhinoceroses, giant deer. And then there were the Neanderthals.
Neanderthals had been living in Europe for over 200,000 years before Homo sapiens arrived. They were not stupid. They were not simple. They made tools. They buried their dead. They cared for their injured. But they were not us.
When our ancestors arrived, something happened that scientists are still debating today. Did we fight the Neanderthals? Did we outcompete them for food? Did we simply replace them? The answer, it turns out, is stranger than all of those.
We bred with them. Modern genetic analysis shows that nearly every person of non-African descent today carries Neanderthal DNA, between 1% and 4% of their genome. Think about what that means. Every European alive today, every American with European ancestry, is carrying fragments of a species that has been extinct for 40,000 years.
The Neanderthals didn't just disappear, they became part of us. By around 30,000 years ago, pure Neanderthals were gone, but Homo sapiens, carrying a little bit of that ancient inheritance, had spread across the continent. And then something happened that no one expected. In the dark, in the caves, the first Europeans made something that would survive for 40,000 years. In 1994, a group of scientists discovered a cave in the Ardèche region of southern France. What they found inside stopped them cold. The walls were covered in paintings, hundreds of them. Woolly rhinoceroses charging, cave lions hunting, mammoths with curved tusks, horses in motion. The detail was breathtaking. The technique was sophisticated. The artistry was, there's no other word for it, beautiful. And they were 36,000 years old. This was the Chauvet Cave, and it shattered everything scientists thought they knew about early human intelligence. Because here's what those paintings tell us. 36,000 years ago, in the middle of an ice age, human beings were not just surviving. They were thinking about meaning. They were asking questions. What am I? Why am I here? What happens when I die? They were creating symbols, not just pictures of animals, but representations of power, of the supernatural, of the world beyond what the eyes can see. One painting in the cave shows a bison with 8 legs, not a mistake, but a deliberate artistic choice, movement, speed, time. It is essentially the world's first animation. The same cave contains a carved figure, half human, half lion, called the Lion Man, carved from a mammoth tusk, 35,000 years old, half human, half beast, a creature that doesn't exist in nature. This is imagination, pure abstract imagination, the ability to conceive of something that has never existed. And that ability, right there, is what separates Homo sapiens from every other species on the planet. When the great artist Pablo Picasso first saw ancient European cave paintings, he reportedly stared in silence for a long time. Then he said, "We have invented nothing." He was right. The artistic genius was already there, deep in a cave, by firelight, 36,000 years ago. Fast forward to about 10,000 years ago. The ice is retreating, the mammoths are dying out, the climate is warming, and for the first time, humans in Europe begin to do something new. They stop moving. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans had followed the animals, always moving, always hunting, always gathering. Then someone discovered something that would change the world. You can grow your own food. Agriculture arrived in Europe from the Middle East. seeds, farming techniques, domesticated animals, spreading slowly from east to west over thousands of years. And when people stopped moving, when they settled in one place, everything changed. Suddenly you had surplus food, storage, trade. Suddenly some people didn't have to farm, they could specialize, become craftsmen, priests, warriors, leaders. Suddenly you had villages, then towns. And with towns came something else entirely, the need to organize, the need for rules, the need for shared belief. And that need produced some of the most mysterious and impressive structures in the ancient world. Around 5,000 years ago, across a vast stretch of Europe, from Spain to Sweden, from France to Poland, people began moving enormous stones. Massive, multi-ton, impossible-looking stones. They dragged them, rolled them, lifted them into circles and rows, creating monuments to the sun, the moon, the seasons, and the dead. The most famous of these is Stonehenge on the Salisbury Plain in England. Think about what it took to build Stonehenge. No metal tools, no wheels, no cranes, just human muscle, wooden sledges, ropes, an almost incomprehensible level of organization. To move those stones from Wales over 150 miles away required planning, coordination, shared purpose, and almost certainly a form of social authority. Someone had to be in charge. Someone had to say, "We are building this," and thousands of people had to listen. Stonehenge wasn't just a monument, it was proof that complex, organized human society had arrived in Europe, and its alignment, perfectly calibrated to the sunrise on the summer solstice, tells us something even more important. These people understood astronomy. They were tracking the sky, measuring time, predicting seasons. 5,000 years ago, before writing, before mathematics, before anything we'd recognize as science. And yet, science. By around 3,500 years ago, something extraordinary was happening on a small Mediterranean island, not in Egypt, not in Mesopotamia, not in any of the great empires of the ancient world. On the island of Crete, the Minoans were Europe's first advanced civilization, and almost nobody talks about them. They built multi-story palace complexes with indoor plumbing. They created Europe's first writing system. They established trade networks that reached Egypt and the Middle East. They painted their walls with vivid, colorful frescoes, athletes leaping over bulls, women in elaborate dress, dolphins jumping over waves. Their society appears to have been remarkably, relatively peaceful and relatively equal. Unlike the militaristic empires of Egypt or Mesopotamia, the Minoans seem to have built their power through trade, not conquest. The greatest of their palaces was at Knossos, a sprawling labyrinth of rooms, corridors, storage halls, and courts so complex that it may have inspired the ancient Greek myth of the labyrinth and the Minotaur, half man, half bull, living in a maze. Sound familiar? That carved figure from the cave, half human, half lion, had become half human, half bull. The imagination of early Europeans was still alive, still creating monsters, still asking questions about the boundary between the human and the animal, between the known and the unknown. The Minoans also gave Europe something that would outlast them by thousands of years. Their writing system, adapted by the ancient Greeks, became the Greek alphabet. The Greek alphabet became the Latin alphabet. The Latin alphabet is what you are reading right now. So here's where we are. Europe has gone from a frozen wilderness to a continent teeming with cultures, languages, and ideas. The first artists painted by firelight in the dark. The first builders raised stones to the sky. The first civilization built palaces, wrote words, and sailed the sea. But something is coming. To the east, a new kind of culture is rising. One built not on trade or art, but on argument, on debate, on questions. A culture that would ask, what is justice? What is the best way to run a society? What are the rights of the individual? A culture that would invent something that no civilization on Earth had ever tried before, something called democracy. And it would happen in one city. One small, rocky, sun-baked city at the southern tip of a peninsula in the eastern Mediterranean. Athens. In Part 2, we go to ancient Greece, and we witness the birth of the ideas that still run the world today. If you want to see Part 2, and you do, trust us, subscribe to Drawn and Buried right now. Hit the bell. Every single part of this series is coming. You've seen where it started. Now let's watch it catch fire.